All right, we're back with another Blizzard dev interview. You guys know the drill by now. We've got half an hour. Time is tight, so we're going to do what we can with this. But I am going to make this a little bit more relaxed, more conversational than usual. It was just a trend that I like to push with the lightning round of questions. But here today, we've got the amazing Nora Valletta and Chris Zierhard. Nora, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
And Chris, mate, thank you so much for being here as well.
Yeah, great to be here.
Chris, I am loving the Luke Skywalker circa The Last Jedi look that you've got going on right now. That's great. The wise mind at the classic team. We've got a lot of questions for you, mate, later on, trust me. But Nora, I might actually start with you. Look, we do have a couple of tough ones, and I figured we'll get the tough ones out of the way early. I've been struggling with how to word this one, but please allow me a bit of a wind up. This might be a long preamble and question, Nora, but listen in. Look, it's very obvious amongst the player base that the classic team is spread relatively thin, and I'm sure it's very obvious internally within the classic team as well. There's a lot of projects going on. This was always going to be a period of time that Blizzard was going to be under the microscope a little bit as you guys try to tackle Season of Discovery, Cataclysm Classic, War Within. Everyone knows that there's just a million things going on right now. And now, during the beta process for Cataclysm Classic and during the pre-patch process, I think it's fair to say that the terminally online portion of the classic player base were a bit disgruntled, and there were some rumblings online about the state of the game and, you know, has Blizzard, and I'm not having a go at the classic team, I'm talking about the company on the whole, has Blizzard made an odd decision here in spreading everyone so thin? What's going on with the product? Now, don't get me wrong, a lot of things have been addressed on launch, but my question goes towards this, Nora. How has it felt internally on the team? Now, I know you can only say so much, but just give us a little bit of an insight onto how you guys have been, what the job's been like over the last few months and working with all that's on your plate right now.
Yeah, I think, that's such a big question. There's a bunch of different directions I could go with this. I guess I'll say that, development tends to kind of ebb and flow. And definitely we've been feeling a lot more busy as of late. As you said, we've got a lot going on the team. And in terms of just kind of, the challenges we face as a team trying to, juggle multiple projects, each member of the team kind of faces a different set of challenges, maybe depending on their discipline or perhaps the type of work that they own. So for our engineers, we've got multiple code branches going for development. And so if something does come up and I happen to be the best engineer for the job, for example, and then if I'm in the middle of implementing my task, I need to get to a good stopping point, either commit or stash the code changes I have in my working copy, and then check out and build the other project. And for this reason, we try to employ strategies that allow us to kind of pivot quickly and react to things and make sure that we're able to quickly and effectively deliver on our promises to our players. And so, I don't know, I do think that, I'm really proud of the work we did to get Cataclysm Classic out the door and into our players' hands, and super, super proud of the team for actioning on things in a highly effective and timely manner.
Let me inject this addition before Chris, you jump in, because I'm going to squeeze it. I'm going to squeeze a little harder, and you guys know I'm not doing this because I know you are limited in the answers that you can give. It's not my first rodeo. But Chris, let me just add in this extra bit of flavor. And again, not having a go at you guys, but just for context, I feel like, particularly through Countdown to Classic, my listener base is very empathetic towards the Classic team. And we realize that you guys have so much to do and so few team members to do it with. However, we do ride that fine line between being empathetic and understanding versus also being paying customers. And so when a product comes out, and obviously as a paying customer, you do want, and you're both gamers, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You want that certain level of, finish, polish, quality, what have you. I guess the additive question here is, how have you guys felt about the state of Kata right now versus the difficulties in working on Kata specifically over the last couple of months?
Well, one thing I can tell you, as much as there were bugs and issues and things that came up when Cataclysm launched that we quickly resolved, there were far, far, far more bugs the first time Cataclysm launched. Right. I was there. I was working on it. I think it was the first time that my personal bug list got to a number over 400. Back when we were trying to ship the original Cataclysm. So we're actually in a much better state now than we were then. But it's a really big expansion with lots of things in it. A complete redo of all of Kalimdor, all of Eastern Kingdoms, and the max level content, and the new raids, and the Clash Ages, and it's actually just so much in Cataclysm. It's just a lot to get to. But I think we're in a good shape now, and it has not kept us from working on Season or Discovery. I'm putting in quite a bit of time on Season Discovery. In fact, just in the last week, getting ready for the next phase there. So players may think that we're spread thin, but it does help that we have some expert veterans like myself who know how to get things done quickly, know where the bodies are buried, so to speak, on how things work, because we were there the first time around.
All right, 1,000.
I will say at the peril of sounding like I hear the whole one of the things that we like to talk about is Cataclysm was a massive expansion. It is a massive expansion. It changed the whole world, and I understand just how almost excusey that might sound if we're talking in terms of balancing quality with a launch. And I just want to say in general, the team is always kind of owning up to things that we wish we could do better, looking back on our development processes and trying to iterate and improve things. It's a really warm and inviting place on the Classic team to have those discussions. And we've already had one retro. We're actually going to have another retro next week just to talk about things. And we're always trying to kind of evolve our team such that we can deliver better results with each and every launch.
Fair enough. No, I know what you mean. A Grend is owning up to being a terrible paladin all the time, so I totally get it. Look, 1,000 follow-up questions that I won't ask. You guys have navigated the waters fine there. We don't have the time for all the things I'd love to go, down that garden path with. But next up, maybe the last really difficult one. Chris, I'll start you off with this one. You've commented in previous interviews over the last week about I think yourself and Clay have touched on the life cycle that's coming for Cataclassic and the proposed production timetable when we're getting certain content. And a lot of the players have highlighted that it does seem to be a faster cadence than perhaps we might have seen with TBC Classic, with, obviously Vanilla Classic and Wrath Classic. Now, the answers that we've been given, I'm sure are all, well and good in terms of, hey, Dragon Soul was problematic back in the day. We don't want to go that long this time around. Totally get it. However, still noting how quick the cadence is, if I were to get very cheeky, Chris, and put on my lawyer hat and say, if I were to suggest to you that perhaps another reason why the cadence is a little bit sped up this time is there might be a slight amount of trepidation internally about the popularity of Cataclysm and the players' reception towards it. Is there anything you think that adds to the equation, or not so much?
I don't think so. I think our schedule is determined a lot by the fact that the World of Warcraft team and Blizzard in general are trying to deliver so many amazing things this year, and where do they all fit, right? When you're talking about Season Discovery and Cataclysm and the World Within and the final bit of Dragonflight, plus the other Blizzard things going on with Diablo 4 and Overwatch, etc. Fitting all of those into a schedule where each one can get its time is probably the single biggest constraint we have to work against. And that's because we have limited engineering resources and limited resources with the people who handle the servers and keep them running, right? So we have to juggle all those things together. And it's not always the schedule we would choose if we weren't a big company trying to do all these things.
Let me add this in, Nora, before you jump in. I want you to know that I'm coming at this from the angle as someone who I quit during Cata. I played 3 seconds of it. I can't comment on Cata too much because I haven't played the game. I guess I would term myself a Cata skeptic. However, I've been loving the hell out of Cata over the last, like through the pre-patch process and in the 3 days since launch when we're recording now. I can't stop playing. I'm really enjoying it. The classes have never been better, in my opinion. And now I am starting to rethink attitudes towards Cataclysm. So the additional flavor on the question to you, Nora, is piggybacking off of what I said to Chris about, again, being very tongue-in-cheek slightly and saying, is there some internal concern over the community's viewpoint on Cataclysm, and that's why things are being sped up? Just to add, how have you guys felt or dealt with the stigma of Cataclysm internally, trying to beat that PR model back of the somewhat negativity towards this version of the game that now, whether it's fair or unfair, we are seeing a fair bit of pushback from the player base in recent months going like, hey, maybe this is the Marty McFly moment where we weren't ready for Cataclysm back then, but we are now.
I actually think, and this is really hard to kind of articulate, but I think a lot of folks actually overlook the effect that where you are in life and how you're feeling about that life that you have can actually also color your perception of the content you experienced back then. Mm-hmm. So there's one vector for any difference in player perception, but at the same time, we employ various strategies to, collect data to try and find out, what are our players really interested in? And what we found is, for a lot of our players, like many of them actually started their entire World of Warcraft journey in WoW in WoW Cataclysm, and they consider Cataclysm their classic. Like that is the only version of the game they would consider classic.
They didn't play before that. Ever.
Yeah, they didn't play.
Yeah.
And many of them will be like, oh, I couldn't play because I was, like a baby. I was in an elementary school and it makes me feel really old. But, at the same time, we totally get that there are completely differing opinions among our players about what version of WoW is the best version of WoW. But where we are as developers is we try our very best, because we all have our own individual player opinions too, right? We try our very best not to kind of sway the players and almost like dictate what they should or shouldn't enjoy based on like what you might label as classic specifically, because we understand that differs. And we don't want anyone to feel bad for enjoying any version of classic WoW over any version of WoW in general over any other version of WoW. Fair enough. There's a lot of WoW right now.
There is, and
more than ever before.
Yeah, and I honestly I look forward to going a few years down the track to figure out whether the amount of WoW we have now, whether it passed the Goldilocks test, whether it was too much, too little, or just enough. Chris, I know you want to jump in. I do want to get you going on the same point. Let me just add this in. Look, you guys you've navigated the hard question waters. Well done. Your media training has served you well. Look, Chris, on that note, that you were there back in the day with Cataclysm as well, just again piggybacking off of what Nora just said. I think one of the reasons that I have found myself perhaps in the shoes that many other players are finding themselves in, surprisingly enjoying Cataclysm more than I thought, is that it does feel like this nice little hybrid between the modern MMO and the, quote unquote old school MMO. You helped build it back in the day, and I've drawn a lot of parallels, whether people agree with it or not, to Final Fantasy XIV. I feel like I'm playing Final Fantasy XIV again, and I love Final Fantasy XIV, so that's great. Do you feel, Chris, having been an old head on the team, that your work back in the day was underappreciated? Or, like I said, I made the Marty McFly joke. Do you feel like Cataclysm got unwarranted flack back then?
I think it did. I think that there were a few factors, some of which have been corrected, that caused a lot of the flack back then. And let's just say one is we knowingly made the game much, much harder at Cataclysm launch. We said, you know what? Lich King dungeons got too easy. Let's make the Cataclysm dungeon really hard to start. Let's make the first raid tier really hard. And it turned out that those were mistakes back in the end of 2009, beginning of 2010, that harmed the game and drove players away from the game. Add into that the guild system that encouraged people to be in these giant guilds and caused the smaller guilds to dissolve and drop away from the game. and we did a bunch of damage to the game with some ideas that we corrected. But those I think had more impact on player feeling and player sticking with the game than anything we did with class design or world design or quests or encounters, any of those things.
Well,
because
on
people
that
were
note,
angry when they would wait. I can't keep the tank alive. I don't have enough mana.
If I can jump in,
or getting wiped out in Blackwing Descent, right?
Chris, I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt because I agree with
Yeah.
you, and the only reason I interrupt is I know that you guys have touched on this in previous interviews, and I don't want to overlap too much.
Yeah.
But I want to jump on what you've said, and I really want to get rather honest and personal here, because you are someone who designs dungeons, you design encounters. This is your bread and butter. I'm dying to know what you personally think of dungeon difficulty in MMOs, what your design philosophy is, what more like, forget about what, is good for the game in air quotes. I want to know what you like, because we just came from this massive discussion in Season of Discovery, a real push and pull between, hey, in 2024, are we eliminating the concept of any form of progression? Any form of progression? Is that something that is not good for a business model in MMOs anymore because player bases can't handle any form of challenge? How do you feel about it, Chris? What do you want to make?
I don't think we've got getting rid of progression by any means. And I think people like to have challenge, but they also have a limit on how much time investment they can make in a game. I think the classic era Burning Crusade was in a very comfortable space when it came to progression and raids, where I could go and raid for 1 or 2 nights a week and make progress all the way through Burning Crusade Classic and stay with a guild and do it all. Back in the day when we were pushing the envelope first time around, the guilds with that kind of accomplishment were raiding 4 or 5 days a week, right? It took a lot more skill back then because players didn't know we were doing that. That's not just true for my guild, but lots of guilds. And I think the game has recently been a really accessible place for people who have limited time can still feel like they're making progress to do this raid sequence, but not have to devote such a massive amount of their personal time to do so. And I think that's a good place for things to be. I also like the idea of people who are making a serious effort and trying and doing what they can to play their character well, being able to progress through all of your content, but then also having some really hard stuff for the people who want to push it a little bit more than that, right? Who want to try for can we beat Yogg Zero, right? Can we, that kind of thing? Can we fight Ragnaros with legs, right? Those kinds of challenges are good, but they shouldn't be all the time. That's kind of where I fall, and I think Classic is a lot in that space,
right?
And mind you, I have some bias because that's what describes my own life. Like I don't want to spend 4 nights a week raiding anymore.
Yep.
I don't want to do it, and I think a lot of our players don't do either, and so they fit very well into Classic, where that's what the expectation is. Yeah, a night or 2 is enough to progress through it, but there's still progression, there's still challenge, there's still really hard encounters. I would not accept the premise that in 2024 there's no progression in MMOs.
Okay, fair enough. Nora, I lied and said there were no more hard questions because Chris is just providing food for thought and getting my mind going. Look, just continuing on with this one. I mean, again, I'm speaking to. It's very hard because I want to speak to both Nora the gamer and Nora the Blizzard employee. And for me, it's a further conversation about like the challenge that game devs have in presenting, engaging, challenging content to the player whilst also keeping in mind that too much of a challenge, let's be real, can hurt the bottom line. Now, I don't want you to speak outside of your pay grade, Nora, but like, obviously, you guys have these discussions internally, and no doubt they filter up to a Holy or whatnot at some point about how hard do we really want to make this game, and is this going to hurt our sub numbers? What do you personally prefer as a gamer, Nora? And do you think it is important as an employee to somewhat ride that fence?
I can answer that latter question first. I do think it's important to ride that fence. And our player selves often show up in these conversations whenever we discuss, okay, do we want to go with the post-nerf difficulty or the pre-nerf difficulty? For me personally, I have very, very fond memories of the pre-nerf versions of those dungeons. However, I'm a player who enjoys challenging and bite-sized content. So like for dungeons, you don't have to pull together 10 or 25 people and then set aside several hours of your night. So I liked that there was challenging non-raid PvE content However, even then, like I rolled up into Grimbatol thinking I was a good healer, and then I left that place thinking, man, maybe I should re-roll or something. Like, I guess, who knows? Maybe more challenging dungeon content is a niche in Cataclysm that something like Titan Rune Dungeons can fill. We're not sure. We're still talking about Titan Rune Dungeons. But still, just kind of going back to the topic at hand of just kind of difficulty in general, we do also recognize that that insane difficulty that Chris mentioned from back in the day, back in original Cataclysm, like it was actually quite off-putting even to players who did really enjoy the challenge. Like there was some amount of, gosh, I like the challenge, this is cool, but like maybe this is a little bit too much, just going a little bit overboard. And it's also making me doubt whether this is the game for me,
I want to challenge one other thing you said.
Yeah.
Which is this idea that we have, when we decide to change difficulty, we got to run it up the flagpole and get approval. The fact is that the Classic team has an incredible amount of freedom to make these decisions, and we're not being second guessed by the people above us. They're trusting us to talk it through, to make good decisions and move forward. And take the example of Titan Rune Dungeons. That was not an idea that anybody from above gave to us. That was actually my personal idea. That I'm like, hey, you know what? Dungeons of Lich King got too easy by the end. I'd like Dungeons to be a little bit challenging because they got kind of boring by the end of Lich King. What can we do to fix it? And coming to an agreement with Josh Greenfield and Tim Jones and other people on our team about what we're going to do about it, what rewards are we going to give. But it was an organic idea from within the Classic team, not something management told us not to do or not to do. And we have a lot of freedom within Classic to find the best solutions ourselves.
Oh, that's good to know. Excellent.
Those player perspectives do really help in those conversations too, because many of us, like, we range in experience, we range in like how much we have kind of engaged with the game over the years, and there are folks like me who are always on the side of like, make it more challenging, and then there are other folks on the team who are a little bit more measured in their responses and kind of like, okay, yeah, but like also let's consider how off-putting that might be to players who maybe don't have a ton of time to sink into the game, or we want to make sure that the game is accessible, still has a good amount of challenge, but is also just, fun. We do prioritize that experience.
Oh, I've wanted to know for years now. I've made the mistake of asking this question in previous dev interviews about where the votes go. I think that the Classic team should be like Congress, and everything you vote for should be public, where we get to see which dev wants what. But sadly, every time I ask, we get I don't quite remember. It's like, you just don't want to say. But anyway, guys, I'll push you down a niche path here, Chris. Whilst we've been fairly general, I'll actually talk about the game for once now. It's funny because you guys have touched on the fact, you were always going to get asked, are you going to do anything with classes in Cataclysm, blah, blah, blah. And the answer has pretty much been, look, we never say never. We'll keep our minds open. And Chris, you even went as far as saying like, yeah, we might even have some ideas in mind that might be coming up fairly soon. So I don't know, whatever that means. But here's an interesting question for you, Chris. Given the fact that you guys are rather open-minded to class changes in Cataclysm, and Chris, you cited obviously a prime reason being we don't want guilds or players or the community to start to exclude a certain class or a spec. We don't want the never bring this guy to raid because they're that tank or that healer, and that's something that you can fix. You've got the power to fix in Cataclysm. Okay. Having said that, please, listeners, don't freak out. You know what I'm like. I'm not asking them to actually do this. I just want to have an intelligent conversation.
Who do you want nerfed?
Well, Chris, it's more that, one of the bigger talking points coming into Cata has been the state of the Blood DK. And, they're so powerful. They're so outrageous, to the point that do they even need a healer at times? I don't want you to touch blood DK, but I want to know about the internal discussions, if any, about this particular spec, because you guys have said, we don't want someone not being brought. So are the prot warriors sitting there going like, mate, I can't get a start because of these bloody blood DKs. Do something, Blizzard. Have you guys talked about it at all?
It's not something we've started to talk about yet, but it is something on my mind that this is an era where the tank balance had a lot of, let's just say we made a lot of tuning changes during Cataclysm the first time around, trying to deal with this problem. So I think it's inevitable we'll have to dip our toes into it again. I don't want to be doing what I was doing back in 2010, where we'd have 6 pages of patch notes about how we retuned every class every single patch. I wrote a lot of those patch notes. But again, if there's something that's a really far outlier that's causing problems, we're going to make a correction. We're going to wait to get some data, probably. Just taking the anecdote of I'm a plot warrior, no one will invite me, isn't quite enough. We need actual data to help us drive that decision. But if there's convincing data that, hey, there's a serious balance problem between these tanks, then we'll probably do something about it.
Fair enough. 5 minutes left, guys. Nora, tell me, out of interest, what are you actually planning on maining for Cata?
Right now, I'm actually maining a disc priest.
Okay, so you're a healer, are you?
Yeah, I do really enjoy healing. If I'm not healing, sometimes what I'll play is either fire or frost mage.
Mm-hmm. Have you
kind of just depends.
Have you dabbled with Resto Druid at all?
I actually mained Resto Druid back in original Cataclysm, which was why I decided on Disc Priest this time around, but I am also going to be leveling my Resto Druid as well. Yeah.
Oh, very good. You're the dev I'll direct this angry rant at then. All right. So,
oh, no.
I never do this with you guys, but for the first time ever, I'm going to actually give a bit of feedback on the class I'm playing. This is, again, I don't want you guys to do anything to the classes based off of anything I say. I don't have that amount of hubris. I'm just ranting. The one thing I found that I've loved, I've adored my Resto Druid in Cata so far. It is just the bee's knees. It feels exactly like a white mage in Final Fantasy XIV, which is arguably the most fun I've ever had in an MMO. So that's fantastic. What is the deal to go full Seinfeld on you with Life Bloom only lasting 10 seconds? Now, I hate it because it compels the Resto Druid to cast a direct heal, which is not their thing, to keep this stupid harmony buff going that increases your dots, that makes them more potent. So, like, I am being forced to, and to go full nerd on you, you cast Life Bloom, you get the 1.5 second GCD. Now you've got 8.5 seconds to cast a direct heal. That direct heal costs 2.5 seconds to cast or whatever. So you've really got 6 seconds to cast other spells before you have to cast a direct heal again. It feels clunky. I hate it. Life Bloom should last longer. Rant over. Nora, what do you reckon?
Did you say, what do I recommend?
What do you think? What do you think of that?
What do you think? What do you reckon?
What do I think? I think he's made some compelling points, Chris.
I think he should be thankful that it doesn't last 7 seconds like it used to in Burning Crusade, right? That at least it's a 10-second Life Bloom that you're fighting with now. But I think part of the intention there was we didn't, when we were designing it, again, back in 2009, want you to just cast hot heal over time and nothing but heal over time. So we wanted some direct heals mixed in.
No, I
and they were just saying, can I have a little bit more time? Some haste can help with that, right? You can lower your cast times. You can lower your GCD on your Life Bloom and Rejuvenation. So, yeah.
I get the variety is the spice of life. And then that's the thing with healers that you guys are prompting them to use their toolkits. I'm just saying, let's be reasonable, people. But anyway.
How many seconds do you want?
Oh, all of them.
Oh, my gosh.
If you ask for the moon, you get nothing. Right?
Exactly. No, I want 15. I want 15 seconds. There you go.
That's ambitious.
Or we can negotiate and go 14. All right, guys, let's end on this note. Chris, we'll go one quick question each.
Sure.
What has been... Well, actually, here's a good question for you, Chris. What have you felt about the somewhat turning of the tides in terms of the attitude towards Cata? Because it has been really notable that people are like, hey, Cata was actually really good, versus the other crowd going like, mate, what are you talking about? We've universally agreed for a decade that it was the worst expansion, blah, 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 blah. But the people are coming in with an open mind. How have you felt about the changing of, or, people opening their minds to it?
I think initially it's surprising, but the more I think about it, the less surprising it is. Because I think, as we've alluded, there's a lot of different people who their version of classic World of Warcraft is something different from everybody else's. So we're moving more towards the strategy of, how do you want to play World of Warcraft? Let's deliver that. Let's give everybody the way that they like the most. Now, that doesn't mean people are going to be spread over different versions of the game, but why not? If we can provide all these different versions of the game and it makes somebody happy to play that version, let's do it.
Very good.
So it was surprising, but now inspiring me to do more of let's offer everything.
Very good. Quick question, Nora, last one. I've just remembered I really wanted to ask this, whether you can answer it or not. When was Cataclysm greenlit? I'm dying to know the point in time, because my guess is quite some time ago. Because, you know, you guys are getting asked, are you going to do mop and everything? I mean, I think that's a bizarre question because it's a foregone conclusion in my mind. I want to see if you guys pull a good poker face right now. But anyway, when was Cataclysm greenlit?
It has been some time. I don't know if I can actually recall an exact date. And part of that being, I think there was at one point in time where I shifted from being an individual contributor to a lead, and definitely your perspective definitely shifts significantly when that happens. And so it's possible that kind of predated that, but yeah, I'm not entirely sure exactly when, but it has been a minute.
I suspect it's before Nora was a lead, and before I was even working on Lich King Classic. I was still back working on a previous Blizzard project.
So what are you talking roughly?
Neither of us knows.
Like roughly 2 years ago, or what?
Or longer.
Well, there you go. My suspicions were correct. All right, guys. Look,
it takes a long time to convert the data. So you have to start the train early. Right?
Oh yeah, 100%. All right, guys. Look, your half an hour is up. I think you both did brilliantly. You didn't say anything controversial or hurt anyone, Alex. I think they did well.
Cool. Thanks for the chat,
Awesome.
Josh. It was fun.
No, thanks, guys. It was a pleasure
Thank
meeting
you.
you. I'll see you around the traps.
Yep. See ya.
Bye.
Bye.